Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. I hope that you're doing well. I'm going to be doing a different type of reading today. I want to start with a channeled message, and then I'm just going to pull cards as I go and see what else wants to come out. But the overall energy of the channeled message is the Hanged Man energy. And this is specifically what I want to talk about today because it feels like it's very active in the collective right now. So the Hanged Man talks to me about activations or evolutions that only happen under tremendous amounts of pressure, right? So the best 3D analogy that I could use for the Hanged Man energy is the type of chemical reactions that they tell us take place in the heart of the sun, right? So what we're told by science is that the sun is predominantly made up of hydrogen, right? Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. And hydrogen has an atomic weight of 1, right? So the idea, the hypothesis is that everything basically starts as elemental hydrogen, and then in the heart of the sun or any star, the tremendous amounts of pressure and heat turn that hydrogen into all the other elements, right? So gold, platinum, iridium, carbon, oxygen, you name it. It's all coming from those intense chemical reactions, primarily the pressure, right? It's primarily the pressure at the heart of the sun that's inducing this evolution, right? And I think that that's what's happening to a lot of us, right? We're in the process of turning from hydrogen to gold or whatever it is that you want to become, right? But the process is uncomfortable, right? And I'm using that solar analogy very specifically because it does feel like this energy is hitting the solar plexus, right? And the solar plexus is where we feel what you would call adrenaline, right? So that entire spectrum of adrenaline, whether it's anxiety or excitement, right? But adrenaline, for me, that is the energy that is associated with superpower activations, timeline jumps, you name it, right? Name a superpower movie or a superhero movie, excuse me, whether it's the X-Men or Batman or any of these movies. They discover their powers through adrenaline, right? X-Men is definitely the best example of this, where it shows most of them as teenagers, something traumatic happens to them, and the next thing they know, they realize they can shoot laser beams out of their eyes, right? We've all been there, right? Where the adrenaline is pumping, and the next thing you know, there's a major timeline jump. One thing I want to say about that is letting go of all of that vibration, love and light, positivity nonsense, right? And the idea that you can only get where you want if you're love and light and rainbows all the time. 100% not true. Some of my biggest manifestations have come on the other side of very frustrated energy, right? Where it's like you finally explode, but then you make that declaration of this is how it's going to be, right? And it's like the same idea as using the voice in the Dune movies, right? When they use the voice, you can't just say, can you get me a glass of water, right? It's like you have to command it, where it's like, bring me water, you know? And typically that's not the voice that we speak with, but that's the voice that gets activated by adrenaline, and that's why adrenaline seems to be a key aspect in magic and miracles and timeline jumping and manifesting, whatever you want to call it. That is a key aspect of the process, right? So I think that collectively our adrenaline is being activated so that we can participate in this timeline jump, right? Because your adrenaline is the rocket fuel, right? And think, I've used this analogy before, but think of like a rocket that's trying to make it to outer space, right? The only way that it can do that is if it achieves escape velocity, right? And escape velocity means tremendous amounts of explosive energy and pressure that take you to that next level, right? So just recognize that if you've had a moment where you were not all love and light, that does not mean that you've disqualified yourself. If anything, that's probably accelerated this process. And I was watching another YouTuber, I forget who it was, I apologize, but this YouTuber was using a Stevie Nicks lyric as an example to explain what I'm talking about now. And it was from the song When the Glitter Fades. And Stephen Nicks, who clearly knows a lot about manifestation and the law of attraction, was saying, you need to remember that the dream is still coming, even if you forgot to feel it, right? Even if you weren't in the love and light vibration, right? It's still coming, right? And another great example of that is that there's a lot of different ancient practices where they would use that energy of anger or frustration or whatever to manifest, because they knew that it was like, it was fuel, it was energy, it could be used. I believe the Nordics or Viking culture would call it seething, right? We have that word seething, right? Like you're seething with anger, but that word comes from a particular practice of, directing this intense adrenaline solar plexus energy towards whatever it is that you're manifesting, right? So so I do think that a lot of that is being activated in the collective right now. It's not punishment. It's not because you did something wrong. It's because we are moving, we are launching, right? And we're seeing again a lot of fiery energy move through the collective. It's like as above, so below. None of that is coincidental. It's horrific, but thank God, by the grace of goodness. I mean, this, if you look at what happened in LA, right? That's square footage the size of Manhattan, right? Bigger than Manhattan. And by the grace of goodness, so far, only, I think the last count was like 11 lives are lost. That's absolutely a tragedy. It should have been 0. But considering that it was not astronomically higher, to me is proof of some sort of higher power just cleaning things up, doing the best that we can do to minimize the unnecessary trauma from this. But there's something about the activation that comes from events like this. And I was at a coffee shop recently in the last week or so, and I usually hang out there, and they have like a little area where you can leave books and stuff. And I saw that somebody had left this art book that they had made that was basically their own manifesto, for lack of a better term. And it was basically this person's life story of how they activated their psychic powers. And what they were talking about was basically that trauma induces dissociation, right? So we experience trauma and we dissociate, we disconnect, right? We disconnect primarily from the matrix Wi-Fi, the programming. The disassociation is what triggers psychic activation. So it's almost like disconnecting from the matrix Wi-Fi and reconnecting to the divine cosmic Wi-Fi, right? But then the goal is that it's like somehow you got to reconnect back to the other server as well so that you can function, right? But I think we've all been through that process time and time and time again, where the dissociation somehow activated the superpowers, right? And dissociation is basically like hermit energy, right? Where we withdraw, where we go into this period of isolation. And the concept of the hermit is not what we think it is, right? Because I don't know what we think it is. Maybe just, some strange eccentric person that's living in the woods or something like that. But back in the day, the hermits, the prophets, the ascended masters, whatever it is that you want to call them, the great teachers, they were all the same thing. And hermitude was not a life sentence so much as it was a protocol, right? The same way as nowadays people will go on a retreat, right? Or they'll do a digital detox or a silent retreat. The the idea behind being a hermit back in the day was that you removed yourself from society, you dissociated, so that you could disconnect from the matrix Wi-Fi. You would put yourself in nature as far away from people as possible, go through your Four of Swords digital detox process, your social detox process, and then somewhere in there you would reconnect to the cosmic Wi-Fi, right? So the goal was to basically reconnect to nature, right? That all of these different prophets that would then come back from the mountains, reconnect with society, right? All of a sudden they could channel and they could speak to the birds and they could understand all of the different omens and symbols, and that was basically how they did it back in the day, right? But nowadays, that's not how we do it, right? I think we do it in these smaller bursts where it's like we don't have the opportunity to live in a cave for 40 days, right? And I think Spirit is very well aware of that. but it doesn't mean that we're going to be robbed from our activation process, right? So the hermitude is much more subtle, but it's still equally as profound, and it does have really significant purpose. And that purpose is to reconnect us to that cosmic Wi-Fi, right? So I'm really just saying all of that to say none of it happened in vain. All of it happened with tremendous purpose. All of it is reactivating a lot of our gifts. I know a lot of people that have watched this channel have experienced extended periods of hermitude and things like that. And I do think a lot of that is coming to an end. But the big thing right now is that solar plexus activation and the hanged man energy. And I have the Nine of Wands at the bottom of the deck too. Nine of Wands is like PTSD energy, right? Where it's almost like a negative anticipation of, oh God, what's next, right? Because we can hear the manifestation is approaching, right? The freight train is pulling into the station and everything is shaken. We can feel it big time. And one thing I want to say is that it's like, your environment is the perfect environment to pull off the manifestation of your dreams, whatever it is that you're hoping for, that you're moving towards. Your circumstances are not a punishment. It is not a mistake. You are in the heart of the sun. You are in the heart of the sun, and your hydrogen is turning into gold, right? It wouldn't happen any other way, right? And that's why you are where you are, doing what you're doing. All of it has great purpose. It's not because you made a wrong turn. It's not because spirit is pissed at you or you screwed something up, okay? It is because that is your Goldilocks zone to do whatever it is that you need to do. I know Santero has a particular hanged man. I forget which deck it's from. It might be from the Light Seers deck, where it looks like the hanged man is doing like a standing leap into the air, right? As if he was just standing there and then jumped into a backflip, right? It seems almost like an impossible feat, right? And that is exactly what I think is about to happen, right? Energetically. And I do mean about to happen, just because, oh, Maron, I mean, go back to the reading that I did about Pluto and Aquarius, right? Pluto and Aquarius is supposed to be a 20-year transit. It started on November 19th. That was the exact same day that all of this drone craziness started, right? And it seems like it has just been a downward descent into madness ever since, right? So the astrology is not taking its time anymore. We just had the North Node shift into Pisces. I think that's going to be really good for us, just because if you want to measure it against your own life experience, the last North Node in Pisces would have been the end of 2006 and most of 2007, right? So 2007 is like the big marker year, but also, tail end of 2006. So just use that for a personal marker. I'm personally excited about the energy of the North Node being in Pisces, just because pop culturally, the year 2007 was full of creativity, right? It's, at least for my generation, it seems like we always talk about that year being the year when all of the best music came out. Amy Winehouse put out her opus that year, but there were a lot of other opuses that came out that year. And I know that there was tragedy on top of all of that, but there's something about the alchemy that's capable, or that's available during this time period, right? Because it was all about turning lemons into lemonade. Britney Spears also put out her Blackout album during that time period. And the reason why I use that as an example is because it was when she was at the height of her chaos, right? This is when she was going through her divorce. She was shaving her head. Everybody was waiting for this poor girl to die, right? This was a girl who was in slavery. We know that now, that she was a slave, right? Literally. And every news outlet had an obituary ready to go, waiting for this girl to die so that she could cash in. And she just so happened to release the absolute best album of her career during that time period, right? While she was completely rogue, right? Out of the grasp of her handlers. She accomplished this. The same thing with Amy Winehouse, right? They were waiting for her to die and she released that album. And there's so many other albums that I can think of that year where it was just alchemy, right? Turning pain, turning a death sentence into gold, right? And I know that those are very extreme examples to use, but that was the energy that was available during Pluto, or excuse me, not Pluto, the North Node in Pisces, right? So North Node, South Node, that's all about purpose and destiny and things like that. It's a complicated energy, but it's basically where the eclipses fall, right? So the solar and lunar eclipses for the next 18 months are basically going to fall on the Pisces Virgo axis, right? So that's where you're going to see your most profound transformation. But Pisces and Virgo really talk about that dynamic between, very strict work ethic with Virgo and very playful, expansive, rebellious energy with Pisces, right? Very creative, but they are a great team, right? Pisces and Virgo are a great team because they are, like the creative, and it's kind of like the perfect example of left brain, right brain, right? Whereas the Pisces is very left brain creative. Is left brain the creative side? No, right brain is the creative side. And then Virgo would be very left brain, you know, logical. So I think that's all I really want to say. I just wanted to check in. I'm sorry that I hadn't posted anything sooner, but thank you guys for hanging in there. If anyone is interested in a reading for yourself, the the readings are still open, so hit me up. And otherwise, I will be back shortly with some more good news. But I love you guys. Hang in there, because again, it's Eight of Wands energy at the bottom of the deck. So the rate of change is speeding up. There's a tremendous amount of information that's available, right? Downloads, maneuvers. I will say that since Pisces has or the North Node has moved into Pisces, I've had a lot more dreams, right? The last 2 days, I haven't dreamt in months, at least in terms of anything that I've retained. But the last 2 days, it's just been nonstop. So I don't know if that has to do with the North Node moving into Pisces, but at least it's like the mud is starting to get washed away a little bit. So I'll leave that there. I love you guys. I will see you soon. Bye, everyone.